it's Chris. Legion Games. Thanks for watching. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple Kickstarter regrets that I have, particularly 5 projects that I look back on and I regret backing for various reasons. Either it wasn't a good game, it wasn't a campaign, fulfillment was an issue, or it just wasn't a good fit for me. Lessons to be learned alongside of it that I've learned, and so maybe I can impart some wisdom to somebody else out there that's looking at Kickstarter as a new thing for them to get on top of and ride that wave that's kind of going in the board game scene right now. So let's just take a stroll down memory lane. Oh, very going to be some great positive memories from my history. So I'm super excited about that. But let's just take a look and maybe some things that I would have done differently. So 5 games that I regret backing for various reasons. Number 5 is City of Kings. Now, this one, if you're familiar with it at all, has all the makings of games that I should have liked. It's fantasy, it's co-op, it's difficult, it's supposed to be high variability, and yet, when it came out and when I played it, it left me with a very bad taste in my mouth. Let's take a look at the Kickstarter page here a minute. Hopefully I don't completely screw this up this time, so this isn't my second or third recording without the sound. But this is City of Kings. 1 to 4 heroes. The artwork is beautiful. The box was gorgeous. The components were great. It only raised about $300,000 in the first time on Kickstarter, and then the subsequent expansion beat that by about another 100,000. And it was, on the surface, a game that I should have liked. It's a little bit longer, it's scenario driven, it's progressive, and you're getting to level up your heroes as you go throughout the game. And you can see just on this picture that there is character customization, and you're moving these cubes up to make your hero stronger, and depending on how you do, depends on what sort of abilities you have. So on the left side of the board there is a technology ability tree. So depending on where you go, you're either choosing the left side or the right side, and you're branching up on one side or the other. So in theory, this has everything that I love, and the art is just, it's fantastic. And I think that's what sucked me in at the first place. They use standees instead of miniatures. You're tile exploring. There's a little bit of worker placement, but it's worker placement-esque rather than, true worker placement. And so why is this on the list of things that I regret backing? Because after playing it several times with the same group, we realized very quickly that this is very formulaic, at least the first several missions. And what I mean by that is the formula seemed to be you needed to specifically put points in certain areas on certain people, and that was really the only way that you were going to succeed. Either you had those abilities, because there was also, I felt, there was a balancing issue with some abilities just being much more valuable on that ability tree that I just mentioned, and some of them that, because you need the other ones, you're either never going to get the chance to go after, or that are just irrelevant. They just aren't as powerful, and so there's some min-maxing going on there. And it's designed to min-max almost. The next thing that sort of got to me was, they talk about this combination. So each time a monster spawns, you're randomly generating it, and you're pulling several of these different aspects and aesthetic features, but also abilities that go along with it. So the customization and the ability to diversify is there. But we found that this became much more surface than actual depth. I mean, they were still very much similar, even though there were some nuanced changes. There wasn't a drastic effect between, one faction and the other always. So that was a little bit not quite what we were expecting. The last one, and this was, honestly, I could deal with a little bit of the first two, Neither of those are groundbreaking or make it or break it for me. I'm willing to put up with it, if you will. The last one was really the issue, is you get to about, I don't know if it was mission 3 or so, and mission 3, the way the enemies progress is they sort of, gradually get harder and harder, and you can see just on the, maybe on the bottom of this that they get harder, and you're flipping over these stat bars consecutively. They're numbered so that you go them in a certain order every single time. And after about mission 3, with the number of enemies that come out, all of a sudden, so it becomes linear instead of logarithmic. What do I mean by that? Well, you can see, I mean, what linear looks like, as well as what logarithmic looks like. Once you reach a certain point, it just becomes drastically different in terms of the slope. And for me personally, we couldn't beat it. We couldn't beat it without doing all of that previously mentioned min-maxing. So if you wanted to do something different, you were being penalized for it, and we were just getting trounced. And this happened several times. We played it several different ways, and it just happened over and over again. And that's not fun. Like, I like hard games. I have Last Bastion, Ghost Stories, those sorts of things, hard mode Pandemic. I don't mind losing. I lose all the time when I play against other people. Everyone, these are my games, and my game group's like, we need to worry about Chris. I lose 3/4 of the games at least that I play. At least. There are games that I play that I have still not won yet a single game of it, and I've played easily double digits of. I'm looking at you, Space Base. So I am never really the biggest threat. I like just having fun. I mean, that's what a game needs to be to me. Whether or not I win or lose is irrelevant. Some people are going to disagree with that, but I think that's important. So this game, not only was it difficult, but it wasn't becoming any fun. It was becoming more number crunchy, and I have to fit in this narrow window, or it's automatic game over essentially. And for the price point this is a significant price point. I mean, $74 for the first one plus shipping. And that was just for the adventure edition, like the basic, you're not getting anything else. Which, I mean, back then it was actually a pretty good deal. The premium edition, you're getting some of the other sets. I dislike looking back on this. Also, the fact that they had the anti-knock sheets or trays that were not included. Like, especially when you have so many cubes like that, are you seriously not going to include that as a basic level? That was, looking back on it, that irks me now. But, and then you get the deluxe edition with the micro expansion, the faction pack, all of that stuff. So I think I upgraded to the deluxe edition. So, no, I did not. I upgraded, but I did not get everything because I didn't want everything. I didn't get the armor set or something. But, so that for me, and then by the time the second Kickstarter came around, I did the create my own. I just wanted to get an add-on. I actually, and this is the other reason I've mentioned in several other videos now that I will go for one of these small pledge levels, because I ended up actually not backing this and not completing this at all. And then they said I was too late to get my refund, so I was just out €5. But lesson learned. But I'm glad at least I was only out €5 and I was not out the whole expansion that was this game that would have cost me, how much more? World Pack was €50. I guess I'm lucky I didn't lose tenfold, because I've seen a lot of people sell this game. I don't see it pop up a whole lot more. I don't hear a whole lot more about it. I'm sure there are people out there that like this and that sort of like how difficult it is and that min-maxing, but it definitely wasn't for me. And this is really one of the games that sort of set me on the path of looking deeper into the gameplay. And so that's the lesson I guess I've learned from this, is I can no longer look at what is on the surface in terms of the art and how I think it may play. I need to know actually how it plays. And it saved me on several games in the future already. So for those reasons, City of Kings was definitely not for me. I don't think it's necessarily a bad game, but it's definitely something that is not going to appeal for everyone for those reasons that I mentioned. Let's talk number 4. Number 4 is Thornwatch. Now, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. This is one of those that I feel like I've gotten the wool pulled over my eye twice. What I mean by that is I have long read intermittently dispersed Penny Arcade comics. And this game is by the guys from Penny Arcade. It's also by Lone Shark Games. And the common Venn diagram of these two is that they put out several games, and I personally have played several of them, and I have been very much unimpressed. And I have very much felt that neither has really risen to the level in which it should have, especially because I feel like in general these guys are pretty careful with what they put their brand on. And I just don't know at the same time, because of backing several of Lone Shark Games' games, that it seems like their attention in the past has been very split between projects, and I think that is shown as well. And some of these projects did not get the due diligence that they should have in the first place. I'm looking at you, Apocrypha. Apocrypha's not on this list. Apocrypha could be on this list, but I think it's actually a much better game than people give it credit for, because the rulebook is absolutely atrocious. It's the worst rulebook I've ever read and tried to get through, and that's a whole nother side story. But Thornwatch. What is Thornwatch? Now, Thornwatch was originally an IP based out of Penny Arcade comics about these kids who are protectors of the wood, called the Thornwatch, and they're fending off evil in the village and in the forests. And the art is beautiful, the theme is great. There's a whole lot of lore that they put behind it. But unfortunately, I just don't feel like that either translated well into the board game, because it tried to be so out there and so different, or it, like I said before, it just wasn't given the attention that it needed to develop, and to develop something that is going to rival the predecessors as well as its cohorts in the same genres of storytelling, narrative, campaignish, but also cooperative dungeon crawl. This raised $650,000 nearly. And I think a lot of it was people like me who have followed PA for a long time in some capacity, who I love their D&D that they do at their conventions. So I know them from several different avenues, and they put out a good product in terms of gaming in general. And so I backed the game, and it was $78 for the base game. Look, gosh, wow, I can't believe I spent $78 on that. And actually, I spent more than $78 because, actually, no, with the shipping, I guess the expansion was included. So good gosh, I didn't lose any more money on it. I almost got the pin that went along with it for $50, but thankfully I did not. So they're basically playing this DM-less game where you're acting as the judge of the wood, and then the other characters are your Thornwatch, that are defending the wood against the enemy. And it's sort of a different way. You don't knock him out, but you move the enemy back along the story track until they reach the end, and then they're knocked out. And the artwork is absolutely tremendous. I love the coloration. The pawns are great, but the gameplay was just not there. The gameplay just didn't match what I expected, and I think what a lot of people expected. And you can't even sell this game right now on the secondary market, because it's just not necessarily well thought of in terms of the actual gameplay that's there, especially for the $78. And the other side of things is it was the game itself was very flimsy. The product was component wise not that good. And so for $78, that's the sort of product that I got was a huge turnoff as well. I really regret this. And why did I say at the beginning of this? I also used to own one of their Cryptozoic deck building games, and it was one of my first games that I ever owned when my wife and I were first together. And again, I bought it based on the IP, the fact that it had come from their comics and that sort of thing. And it was very crude. It was very basic as well. It didn't really have any interesting, unique mechanisms that I look back at now and say, wow, this was innovative. And I think you can say that about a lot of the Cryptozoic games, actually. I saw it then, and I should have been warned on this one, and I wasn't, and now I've learned my lesson. So this is one I really regret backing for those reasons. Artwork is not the end-all be-all. Something you know already, you have to be aware of your own biases. And I think that's the lesson from this, is those two. Be aware of beautiful looking art. when there's not much gameplay shown. And just because you know an IP and you like an IP somewhere else does not mean it's going to translate well into a different medium or into something else you will like in that medium. The big concern I have lately and how that ties in is Darkest Dungeon. People that went in on it because they're familiar with the video game, are they going to get the board game and have the opposite reaction? I think that'll be really interesting to see about a year and a half from now. So, okay, that was number 4. Number 3. Now this is going to be probably the most controversial one on the list. And I'm mentioning it as one of the games that I personally backed, but I'm expanding it a little bit broader, and that's why it's going to be a little controversial. Personally, for me, Tiny Epic Kingdoms and Tiny Epic in general as a regret. Now, why is that? Well, because I love the idea of a game that is pocketable, portable, playable easily. But of the Tiny Epic games that I have played, I do not find them engaging enough or deep enough or with enough oomph to make me want to play them again. And so the lesson learned already, I'm going to give the lesson up front on this one for me, is that, I've said this before, and I truly believe this, that just because it's a cheap price doesn't mean you should get it. I think a lot of us see cheap price, a lot of content as the siren song, that they entrance us and lure us in. A Tiny Epic game with a bunch of stretch goals is only $19 plus shipping. Oh yeah, that was a pretty good deal. I have started looking at it as do I need another game in my collection? Do I need something else to collect another couple inches of dust? Or is that going to be the difference between me getting ether fields in a single wave versus split shipping? Because that's the difference right there. If I wouldn't have gotten that, I could have done split shipping and I'd have ether fields right now sitting behind me, but I don't. It's just taken a new mindset for me with the failure of myself backing that in the past. Now, all Tiny Epic games, I'm not saying all Tiny Epic games are bad, because there are definitely some that are better than others. There are some that appeal more to me or to other people than others. But in general, I think the idea behind Tiny Epic whatever is to play on, again, FOMO, because all of these have significant Kickstarter exclusive stuff that you get in, and so you're getting a value. But if the game isn't any good, the value isn't going to hold. And I think you're seeing that with several games that are being released right now. We always clamor for more stuff on these Kickstarters, more junk, more boxes, more stretch goals. But realistically, when you sit back, lean back, think about it for a minute, do I really need 6 or 8 more characters when even playing it through 2 or 3 times, each time with different characters, I still haven't used them all? Or they're not even drastically different. They're so minutely different that it doesn't really matter if you have 6 or 8 more of them. I don't have unlimited shelf space. Shelf space is limited. I don't need an extra box or 2 cluttering up things, especially if I can't get to it, or if I'm just going to turn around and flip it, usually at a loss. So for me, the Tiny Epic series in general has been one that after the first, I think it was after since Galaxies, I haven't really looked at one since. I liked Galaxies. Galaxies was fine. Again, I think they've launched like 2 or 3, versions of every single one. So the other lesson, I guess, not, unknowingly I got there, teaching myself a lesson as we go, folks, is that if it's really good, it's going to come around again. And most of the time it's going to have better improvement. The errata is going to be fixed. Tiny Epic Ultra Edition. How many of you have backed more than one copy of one of those? Defenders, Kingdoms, Galaxies. They redid the art on Galaxies. WTF? I mean, I can't tell if it was from a branding standpoint or a publishing standpoint. It was just weird. Anyway, side commentary. But for me personally, now I know. And those are the lessons I've learned, and I'm trying to apply those to games going forward. Which is why a couple of the games that I've backed and then canceled on my just recently released backing and not backing of October and November, several of the games that sort of fit this niche. So, there you go. Tiny Epics. Gosh, now we're getting to the painful stuff. I won't lie. I don't even want to pull up the Kickstarter pages for these last two because it's going to be a gut punch and, stab to my heart. Number two. Neither of which I will say for number two and number one, I have neither of these in my collection still. So I was at least able to get something for both of these, and I feel halfway decent about that. Number two, Sentinel Tactics, Flame of Freedom. This is the one I don't want to. I think I know what this number is going to be when I pull up the Kickstarter page. I don't want to look at it though, having not looked at it in a very long time. This was by the Sentinels of the Multiverse. This was sort of going to be their next branch out for their IP. And this is sort of what I hoped the Sentinels Freedom 5 was going to be, but just wasn't. And for a variety of reasons, it just kind of failed. For me, it was a combination of things I was really heavily interested in that time. I mean, they had a lot of stretch goals. It had miniatures, the IP, the hero fantasy, cooperative game, skirmish, tactical nature. It was hitting on all cylinders, and so I definitely got sucked into the FOMO. Okay, let's do it. Let's pull up the page. Let's just bite the bullet, rip the band-aid. Let's do this real quick. Okay, here we go. $100. I'm pretty sure I upgraded and got the expansions, and so I think that was an extra like $40 maybe. Let's take a look. Let's be complete about this. Maybe not. I feel like I paid more in the pledge manager. Anyway, that's $100+ It raised almost $250,000. Again, it's everything I mentioned. I don't know why it failed. It just wasn't a great game. This semi-co-op nature is always an issue, and the miniatures were not great. The miniatures were not good. They were smaller than I expected. The detail wasn't there, and the appeal was just completely lost. So it was just a complete fail on my side of things. And it turned me off to Sentinels of the Multiverse in combination with what I already knew about it, because I found out that Sentinels of the Multiverse is not really what I wanted in the first place, because I thought it was something different than it was, having played it several times. And so I thought this was sort of redemption. It clearly wasn't. I think I sold this on the cheap locally to someone, and I think I maybe made back 40 of that $140. So this was an expensive lesson for miniature games, for FOMO, for gameplay over everything else for me. So I have a lot of regret on this one. Pre-painted? No, thank you. They're still having trouble with that in Kickstarters, and back then it was even more. So I think the execution was just there. I can't even tell you anymore. I basically abandoned this shortly after I got it and tried to get into it, and I can't tell you anything more. I mean, it was just not well received. So let's take a look at the Board Game Geek page, and maybe this can encapsulate a little bit better of the concern. Is the theme's great, choices are low, randomness is super high, strategy is paper thin. Engine's fine, characters are mostly fine, there's some balancing issues, but the scenarios are just not good, and it just falls flat. And this is the other thing, I think, with a tactical game, when you're going to market it with hexes, they're going to be moving around, and this was my big problem with Bardsung, was that spatial maneuvering is just not relevant. And also with Gatefall, spatial maneuvering just became less important, and a reason why I got out of that one as well. So, I mean, the comments are just in line to reflect that. The average is 6.7, which is higher than I would have expected, to be frank with you. But for me, it was one of my biggest regrets, and I think that that has shown subsequently, even though I can't eloquently put it out there as well as I would like. So, what is number one? And again, I don't have number one in my collection anymore. And frankly speaking, this is still left the worst taste in my mouth, even though I was actually able to make back a considerable amount of money on this. And I probably lost less on number one than I did on number two. So, why is it number one? Bing. Myth. Now, I missed the first Kickstarter, thankfully, I guess, even though the first Kickstarter was basically just, massive amounts of content for the money. And the second one came close, but it was not quite there. And so I got in on Myth Journeyman because, again, I went by appearances. The fantasy element, the difference in terms of the dungeon crawler tactical nature of things. The art was amazing. The miniatures were pretty good. And I was new. You know what I'm talking about. New board gamer. So, ooh, money to spend. Let's burn a hole in my pocket. And this is the number one thing that I learned from that is no matter how big and successful it is, there's always a risk that something could happen in terms of fulfillment. The second one is that the whole reason why I backed some of the other games that I did subsequently, even ones that are mentioned in this and mentioned in my roundup, is that I got burned by putting too much money in the Kickstarter campaign. And then when I went to do the pledge manager, realizing I didn't want some of that stuff anymore, but I'd pledged over the amount, I couldn't get it back. They were only going to give me credit. They're not going to refund me at that point in the pledge manager. I put something like $240 in because I calculated it out beforehand. I went down with a little tab thing and base pledge is this expansion add-on is this character is this character is this, and I added them all up in 240. We got to reach our stretch goal. There you go. Well, long story short, if you know anything about Myth and the drama that it's been, is they basically went out of business over this. They couldn't fulfill things. They didn't get things done. They couldn't do until Ulysses Spiel finally bailed them out about, I don't know, like a year ago or so. And they're in production to finish the fulfillment of things. So finally, I think we've gotten some of the product, but no miniatures have come out. No miniatures for anything non-base game that wasn't in the two base games. And the two base games were the Blackwall Warrens and the Shores of Canis. And this raised almost $1 million, which back in 2015, because that's when it funded. Oh my freaking gosh. 2015. 5 years ago. And it still hurts. We still don't have miniatures. They just posted, I think, an update like within the last month or so. August, actually. So they've got some miniature prototypes. I'm not even looking. It just burns me still. And I did, the $200, $200 pledge level. There. I did the $220 pledge level. And now I would not do anything near that. But you can see, I mean, just the graphic there is just a ton of content. That dragon still looks amazing. Anyway, Ice Dragon. I love the concept. And rumor has it, Ulysses Spiel is, they still own the IP. And they are going to be putting out a new game here. Actually, I think in Kickstarter sometime in... let's see if I can find it here. Myth, Dawn of Heroes, sometime in 2021, where they're taking the IP and basically redoing it. And I don't really know what to expect of this. And this scares me because I think that the actual gameplay is there. It was just put together and the overhead was not done well. The explanations were not done well. The follow-through was not done well. There was too much sandboxing needing to be done. I mean, they meant this game to be a sandbox, but it was almost a literal sandbox because you just didn't know where to go and what to do at times. There was absolutely no direction of how to do things. And so people had to home rule it. People had to, teach themselves. People had to make up stuff. People had to teach other people. And the company it just wasn't good. And so this scares me the most because this is one that could very well suck me in again. But I think it's going to be one where, like SFG right now, they're going to have to do their due diligence and make goodwill out there because I don't think they have a whole lot of goodwill, even though this is now a separate company, a completely different company from Europe that has taken this and bought this and owns it. And I I regret this wholeheartedly. So wholeheartedly. But the potential was there. The stuff is quality, but it just was not well executed. And that is why people rag on Kickstarter all the time that Kickstarter shouldn't be a pre-order. Well, even Simon is worth millions of dollars. Simon is worth millions of dollars, maybe, but all it takes is one or two failed projects like this, and the whole house of cards can collapse. And so, why not take the money that is offered free of interest that you don't have to get from a bank? You don't have to count and or expect how many pledges or pieces are going to be bought at retail. You get an upfront number and you just produce that many plus a little bit. And if it does well, maybe you reprint it in the future at retail and you could be done with it and move on to the next project. So it's actually a really good business model. But if it doesn't work and there are issues and you don't know what you're getting into, myth happens. And it just goes to show you that, even Myth, who was relatively big at the time, even big guys can fail. So just buyer beware. You can always add more to the pledge manager later, or pay through PayPal later. Maybe get them to refund you. So there you go. That is numbers, 5 through 1 for me. I've got others, and I'll probably have follow-ups down the line in terms of other ones I regret, but also a video or two of ones that I absolutely lucked out on and that were amazing and that I can't believe that were that good. So that's the sort of thing I'm probably going to be putting out there a little bit more in terms of my own personal thoughts and collections. And I've got a couple other, Kickstarter comments and videos coming up in the future. If that appeals to you, shoot me a subscription, shoot me a comment. What do you regret backing? And do you own it still? Let me know. I'd be interested to hear what else is out there. I mean, I know there's plenty of other stuff out there that hasn't gone well. It's just thankfully I've avoided some of the other ones, and these are my, flat tires. Okay. As always, thanks for watching, and I appreciate it. I really do. I'm trying to grow the channel, and anything that you do, including just watching for a couple minutes, really helps out. So I appreciate it. See you next time. Stay classy.